on NewsCenter this Friday night. The UN General Assembly denounces North Korea and Iran over their human rights abuses, encouraging the Security Council to refer North Korea to the International Criminal Court. Signaling change in landscape. For the first time ever, Korea okays the opening of a foreign-owned for-profit hospital in the nation. What does this mean? We'll have the details. And Asian stock markets end lower this Friday as a persistent drop in global oil prices weigh on investor sentiment, eroding gains sparked yesterday by the Fed's first rate hike in nearly a decade. NewsCenter begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those around the world. Welcome to NewsCenter. The UN General Assembly has made it clear once again, North Korea's cruel and inhumane treatment of its people is just unacceptable. A resolution of the regime's human rights abuses passed the UN General Assembly with flying colors on Thursday. Arirang's Connie Kim has more on how members of the international community continue to pressure Pyongyang to change its ways.
For the second consecutive year, the UN General Assembly has overwhelmingly passed a resolution condemning North Korea for its human rights abuses. Of the 193 member nations, 119 voted in favor, 48 abstained, and 19 voted against it. As with last year's, the resolution condemns the ongoing systematic, widespread, and gross violations of human rights in North Korea and encourages to hold the North Korean leadership responsible for crimes against humanity. What's new this year is that it also urges North Korea to abolish its political prison camps, immediately release its prisoners, and become a member of the International Labor Organization. Pyongyang's representative at the UN slammed the resolution, calling it a political plot and conspiracy against the regime.
The draft resolution has no relevance to the genuine protection and promotion of the human rights, as it is a product of hostile police, political plot, and sinister conspiracy against the DPRK on the part of the United States, Japan, and other forces in their attempt to break down the state and social system of the DPRK.
Although the resolution is not legally binding, observers in Seoul say it's expected to put pressure on the reclusive state.
It's inevitable that North Korea's elite class will feel pressured. Although the regime may not comply with the resolution in the short term, there is a possibility North Korea will take measures to improve its human rights situation to ease pressure from the international community.
This, experts say, could lead to talks with the UN and Pyongyang taking a more cautious approach to its human rights situation. Pressure has been mounting on the regime, especially with a recent UN Security Council meeting voicing support for a debate on referring North Korea's leadership to the International Criminal Court. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Korea will see its first ever for-profit medical center in a little over a year, and it will be foreign-owned. The nation's health ministry has approved the establishment of a Chinese investor-owned medical center on Korea's resort island of Jeju. Now, the landmark decision may lead the way for more such hospitals to pop up in Korea, which some in this country are concerned about. Kim Ji-yeon has more on what this means and how it would reshape the country's medical services sector.
The Korean government has given the green light on a project to build a foreign-owned for-profit hospital on its soil for the first time. The for-profit or investor-owned hospitals are intended to generate profit for their shareholders from earnings reaped from the medical services. The Ministry of Health and Welfare said Friday it approved the establishment of the China-based Greenland International Hospital on Jeju Island. A 3-story hospital is expected to offer treatment services in internal medicine, dermatology, cosmetic surgery, and family medicine starting March 2017.
Even after careful inspections, we found no legal issues hindering Greenland Group to build a hospital in Jeju Island.
Some believe the ministry's approval will lead to the building of many more for-profit hospitals in the country, which will greatly diversify its medical services sector. Professor Lee Yong-ju at Dongdeok Women's University's Department of Health Sciences says, in some ways, the establishment of for-profit hospitals will help improve the competitiveness of the country's public healthcare system, with vulnerabilities exposed in the handling of the MERS outbreak in May. At the time, local media outlets pointed to the lack of medical staff, resources, and equipment of local hospitals as one of the main factors that prolonged the MERS outbreak. But Riche also warns that for-profit hospitals will greatly affect equality of medical services once hospitals are allowed to offer premium services to patients that can afford them. Currently, all local hospitals are non-profit, which has allowed any Korean national with public health care to easily obtain access to hospitals and receive medical treatment. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
It's no longer news. Korea's rival political parties remain at loggerheads over pending bills. The extra session for this month opened over a week ago, and the presidential office has been upping the pressure on the lawmaking body. With no fruitful outcome, just the opposition bloc's accusation of the top office infringing upon the Assembly's intrinsic right to legislate. Now, Arirang's parliamentary correspondent Kim Myung-gil joins me from the National Assembly. Now, Myung-gil, how is the ruling party reacting to this dreadful delay in business?
Kon-young, the ruling Saenuri party is getting impatient, fearing that they might come out empty-handed again by failing to pass urgent bills in this month's extra session. Let's hear what the floor leader had to say.
If we failed to pass bills on reforming Korea's labor market, promoting the service industry, and revitalizing our economy, the livelihoods of the middle class would be at risk. We sincerely urge the opposition to cooperate.
With no progress on pending bills at the National Assembly, the presidential office of Cheongwade has been demanding lawmakers to do their legislative duties. Cheongwade has also tried to influence the Assembly Speaker to use his authority to table certain bills for parliamentary endorsement. The move has drawn harsh criticism from the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy.
Now the president is blaming the National Assembly and even accusing the Assembly Speaker of not doing his job. This violates the principle of separation of powers among the three branches of government and infringes upon the Assembly's intrinsic right to legislate.
The NPAD responded to the president's request by claiming that her economic bills were flawed. They emphasized that the labor reform bills would make it easier for companies to fire workers and increase the number of irregular workers because employment contracts will be extended from the current 2 years to 4 years. As the parliamentary deadlock continues, rival party leaders will meet on Sunday to try and reach a compromise on contentious issues, including readjusting electoral boundaries and a counter-terrorism bill. Kon-young?
Oh, well, that hopefully will be the last meeting of that sort, and we will see the leaders leave that room with a compromise on Sunday. Our Kim Myung-gil from the National Assembly. Thank you, Myung-gil. Now, staying in the political realm, some interesting numbers in its recent survey. An Cha-soo, a former opposition party leader and co-founder of the NPAD who called it quits with the party recently, is seen as the more valid presidential candidate to represent the opposition bloc than the current main opposition leader, Moon Jae-in. Our senior parliamentary correspondent Park Ji-won has a breakdown of the latest popularity ratings for the two presidential hopefuls.
According to Gallup Korea's weekly survey Friday, 41% of the respondents chose An Cha-soo as the next presidential candidate representing the opposition bloc, while 33% preferred Moon Jae-in, the current NPAD leader. However, poll results varied according to the respondents' political inclination. Nearly 60% of those who support the main opposition NPAD picked the Liberal Party's leader Moon as the next opposition presidential candidate, while only less than 35% chose An. Meanwhile, former doctor-turned-software tycoon and NPAD co-founder An enjoyed the most popularity among those supporting ruling conservative Saenuri Party. And those who do not have any particular political inclination also preferred An to be the next presidential candidate over Moon. Where the respondents were from also influenced the results. An enjoyed the biggest margin of popularity in Jeollado province and the city of Gwangju, Korea's representative liberal strongholds, with 48% as opposed to Moon's 27%, which reflected the liberal region's general dissatisfaction with current NPD leadership. As for respondents from the capital Seoul, 40% chose An as their preferred candidate to represent the opposition bloc, while 37% leaned towards Moon. In other regions, An took the lead by some 17 to some 7 percentage points. The results also demonstrated that 25% of respondents disapproved An's decision to leave the NPAD, while 44% of the respondents viewed An's departure as good and timely, citing reasons like the need to create a new political force in the country. 박지원, Arirang News.
Nail salons, restaurants, cafes, and other signs of consumerism were unheard of in rigidly controlled North Korea up until just a few years ago. Today, they're slowly emerging in one of the world's last bastions of Cold War socialism. That's because of a growing middle class, or North Korea's Nouveau Riche, as they're called. Not only that, they're also learning Western-style economics, business, and finance. The final of my two-part series. Singapore. With a population of 5.5 million and growing, the modern city-state off the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula is one of the world's major commercial hubs. Global businesses trade around the clock, and investors can transact with any part of the world within the same working day. It is to this vibrant market economy that a group of newly emerging capitalists are heading to learn and experience a real market economy. They are the rare but fast-growing business professionals of North Korea. At the forefront of this new phenomenon is Jeffrey K.C., founder of Chosun Exchange, a non-profit that provides economic, business, and legal training for North Koreans and support entrepreneurship in the reclusive state. C was inspired to create Chosun Exchange during his trip to the Hermit Kingdom in 2007 as a business school student in the U.S. The Singaporean was surprised to meet North Koreans his age who had keen interest in business and economics. Since then, his offices in Singapore, Beijing, and Washington have facilitated more than 900 North Koreans for the two-way exchange program. Most of their trainees work at state companies or institutions in North Korea. Others are upper-middle-class North Koreans who run or hope to run small enterprises, typically restaurants or cafes. The sessions in Pyongyang involve a foreign expert, usually in the field of entrepreneurship or marketing. They volunteer as workshop leaders and lecture on Western business practices.
And the idea is that if you create more unique snowflakes, more interesting snowflakes, you get a higher price from her. So I used to teach them to, you are competing with other businesses and you need to innovate. You need to do something different to get my attention.
Chosun Exchange also brings North Koreans out to Singapore to train them. North Korea's most aspiring business people tour Singapore's fancy shops, meet business leaders as well as policymakers. They compile field reports of the shopping district using technical marketing frameworks, learn online research, and create product brands. What Chosun Exchange is especially focused on is the newly emerging small and medium-sized enterprise segment in North Korea that generates $500,000 to $1 million of revenue.
These are relatively autonomous entities. So very often they are linked to a state-owned enterprise, but the managers who run it are left to more or less decide how they want to run the business. I think they keep a larger share of their profits. And compared to the grassroots segment, this segment is very interesting because it's scalable. These are businesses that have the potential to grow down the road into a $10 million operation, $100 million operation.
Because if you look at the recent estimates of the North Korean GDP, you will see that it's estimated that the private sector produces between 30 and 60% of the total. If it's 60%, it's probably higher than in many European countries nobody would describe as socialist.
Chosun Exchange's work is made possible because there's continuous demand from the North Korean business people. But planning is never easy. Gaining permission to travel abroad is always a challenge for North Korea residents, even for the more privileged upper middle class.
Are we looking at the tech entrepreneurs that we want to train in North Korea?
Well, I think March is going to be, it'll probably be difficult to get a large female audience for that.
Yep.
We can talk to our partners about it, but it's going to be mostly banking and finance people, and like any country, there's an underrepresentation of females.
In July 2014, Jeffrey and his team brought 8 North Korean entrepreneurs to Singapore for a month as interns for local startup companies. The experience turned out to be overwhelming and enlightening for not only the North Korean participants, but also for the Singaporeans who hired them.
It's very different from a local Singaporean or intern. Their behavioral-wise, it's something that is unique, so to speak.
How?
Yes, bring them out around Clarke Quay shopping centers, for example. Ladies would go into an accessory shop and just go crazy with it, and they'll spend an amount that is beyond my belief, basically.
Really?
Yes, they will buy stuff like hair clips, hair bands, rubber bands, and they'll go, oh, this is very pretty, this is very pretty, we don't have this at home, and they'll just go crazy with that.
These people make up another class of North Korean merchants that's more actively engaged and operates on far more ambitious scale than those trading in the black market. They are the North Nouveau Riche and quickly becoming an indispensable part of the North Korean economy. The U.S. Federal Reserve's landmark decision to increase short-term interest rates is considered a game changer in a world of abnormal monetary policies. Central banks around the world have since followed suit with rate hikes, starting with oil-pumping nations. But on this Friday, global markets wiped out gains sparked by the Fed's first rate hike in nearly a decade, with Asia finishing the day in negative territory as persistent drop in the price of oil weighed on investor sentiment. To which direction should the world's policymakers take their interest rates, and what about Korea? Riche reports.
With its rate liftoff, the U.S. Federal Reserve has opened the floodgates for a shift in the world economy. Following a rally in global stocks, central banks elsewhere followed suit with rate hikes, starting with the Gulf nations. 4 of the 3 Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain, reacted within half an hour of the Fed's announcement, raising a 0.25 percentage point, matching the Fed's move. The United Arab Emirates, too, climbed on board the rate ride upwards. The immediate response came from the tendency of oil-pumping states to shadow movements within the U.S. as their currencies are pegged to the greenback. In Asia, Hong Kong, which has its currency also pegged to the dollar, also lifted its base rate by 25 basis points, putting it at 0.75%. On the other hand, Indonesia and the Philippines both kept rates steady. Ahead of the Fed's decision, Korea froze its benchmark rate at a record low of 1.5% for 6 straight months.
Korea should not be rushed into changing its course of economic policy despite varying monetary policies around the world. But it sure has to monitor further movements like the Fed's future gradual rate hike and the indirect impacts stemming from the liftoff on emerging markets.
Experts add that although Korea's current low base rate is considered sufficiently accommodative, the Bank of Korea may be forced to reverse gears sometime mid-next year, depending on the pace of rate adjustment from the U.S. 신세민, Arirang News.
Red hot on the heels of Apple's announcement that it has agreed with China's UnionPay to bring Apple Pay to China, Samsung is now releasing word that it too has secured the same deal, the same rollout roadmap. Subject to testing and regulatory validation, Samsung Pay will be available to UnionPay cardholders early next year. But the two smartphone rivals are in for a tight race in the Chinese market as China's own mobile payment services have already established a large consumer base. Our Kim Min-ji has this report.
Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics will partner with China's credit card operator UnionPay for its mobile payment service to make inroads into the world's second-largest economy. This means UnionPay card users in China that own the latest high-end models of Samsung's Galaxy series will be able to access their credit and debit cards just by simply using their phones. Samsung Pay uses magnetic secure transmission technology similar to the magnetic strip on credit cards, which means it will work on traditional card terminals. This is in addition to near-field communication technology, which requires a separate transaction device at cash registers used by rivals like Apple Pay. But Samsung will have to gear up well, as Apple has also inked a separate agreement with UnionPay to provide its services in the country.
Although Korea is on a better footing thanks to its MST technology, in the short term it's at a disadvantage as Chinese people have a preference for Apple's iPhones. It'll be important for Samsung to expand its payment service to low-end smartphones rather than just luxury ones.
But the two rivals' success in China won't be easy coming. China-based Alipay has already established a large customer base, accounting for more than 80% of the country's mobile payment transactions, which more than doubled to $3.5 trillion last year. Experts say the focus for the new players shouldn't be about taking the top ranks, but how successful they can secure new customers, as both Samsung and Apple face fierce competition within the Chinese market itself. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Help Syria is a voluntary coalition of Koreans concerned about Syrian refugees. At the forefront of this aid group is Abdul Wahab al-Mohammad Agha, chief and founder of the group, and a Syrian himself, in person with me this week. Abdul Wahab, welcome to the program.
Welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me to this program.
All right, you were the first Syrian to come to Korea as an international student to study, and you created this group, Help Syria. How did you first come to create this group, and what kind of achievements have you made?
I started to translate the Syrian news and send it to the Korean friends and to Korean journalists. I want the Korean people to know what's happening in Syria now. But I thought that's not enough. I'm not satisfied about that, so I started to collect the friends and invite them to do something for Syria effective than the translation news. So we thought the supports for the refugees will be very amazing and it's helping good. So I started to making Help Syria organization. So before 2 years and 3 or 5 months, we established Help Syria organization and started officially to working and collect supports for the Syrian refugees inside Syria.
Now, do you have family back in Syria?
Yeah, my family lived to Turkey before 1.5 months. Now living in Turkey safely in safe place. Before that, they lived in Raqqa. In my hometown, it's Raqqa in Syria. So I now.
Right, Raqqa is a city that comes out often on our news because of those airstrikes and because it's now a stronghold of ISIS, like you said. Roughly half of Syria's 23 million people have now become refugees. They're scattered in different countries, mainly Turkey, like your family, Lebanon and Jordan. What kind of help, what's absolutely required by these refugees the most?
Inside Syria, there are many refugees. They need many help inside Syria. They need many things. They need medicine support. They need food. They need clothes. They need education system. The children there, they cannot read. They cannot write anything now. In the middle school, they cannot read anything. So I surprised shock to me, big shock to me, because as you know and as the people know, the Syrian education system is very well comparing between other countries in the Middle East. But now the children, they cannot do anything, they cannot study. So if we will not take care of those children, we will lose one generation in Syria. Yeah, that's very, very horrible situation.
That's definitely a global tragedy. Now, especially in the aftermath of the Paris terrorist attack and threats afterwards, which have been blamed on ISIS, many countries, including countries in Europe, have shifted their immigration policies. And of course, there is a big debate going on in the U.S. about taking in refugees because, especially Syrian refugees, because some of them believe that they could pose a threat. How do you feel about this?
Actually, that's... I don't know how to explain my feeling now, because it's very not... we cannot say it's very rude. It's very bad. Because there are many refugees suffering there in Syria and outside Syria also. But all the international media, all the international community, society also focusing on IS. They're just considering all the Syrians as the IS. So for Europe and also United States, they're closing their border for the Syrian refugees, and they're saying there are many terrorists between these groups of refugees. That's not true. Now Syria is suffering a lot. Before, Syria helped many countries, but now Syria is suffering. In the future, we don't know which the country will suffering also. So we have to just do many things for the refugees.
Right, in the name of humanity.
Yeah.
Last but not least, what are some ways that we here in Korea can offer help to Syrian refugees, just refugees in general, that you are in contact with?
We can help them by watching the news, focusing on the Syrian crisis, more focusing on what they need. If they need food, we can sending money to the organization working inside Syria or the neighborhood countries, and they deliver the food for them. We have to educate our children about the refugees, about the war, about the civil war, because there are many people suffering because of this civil war. So we have to educate our children. The innocent people there, not terrorists. The people there suffering a lot, so we have to help them to do something for them. The winter coming now, we in the middle of winter, it's very cold there inside Syria, also in the neighborhood countries. The refugees living in the tent without anything. So they need help. In South Korea, we can collect donations and send it to Syria, and also medical support, many things. We can do many things, but we have to start.
Right, so they're just humans like us.
Yeah.
And we, on the part of the global media, should not forget to shed light on the refugees, on those Syrians suffering from ISIS within Syria as well.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in today, and I wish you best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, we just spoke about a huge and growing number of Syrian refugees, and the United Nations Refugee Agency has numbers to back it today. The UNHCR predicts 2015 will set a record for the number of people forced to flee their home country around the world. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Bruce, the High Commissioner for Refugees warned forced displacement is likely to exceed 60 million people for the first time ever.
Hello, Kanyang. That's correct. The figure is staggering. And according to the UN agency, that means that roughly 1 in every 122 people living today has been forced to flee their home. Most are escaping war, especially the conflict in Syria. 1 million alone have crossed the Mediterranean Sea this year, seeking refuge in Europe as well.
So, Bruce, what's the outlook like for the crisis in Europe and displacement just overall?
That's a good question. There's a few indicators being used to measure the situation. One is voluntary return rates of refugees. Now, that's a measurement of refugees that return to their home country by their own will. And according to the UN's report, those rates are at their lowest level in 3 decades. The crisis this year has been especially hard on Europe as countries struggle to provide refuge for hundreds of thousands of refugees. The situation has strained Great Britain's negotiations to remain in the European Union as well. Prime Minister David Cameron announced today, though, that he thinks there's a pathway to a deal with the EU.
It's going to take a lot of hard work, but what I sense tonight in the room, that there's a lot of goodwill, there is momentum. People want a deal that keeps Britain in the European Union by giving us the European Union itself.
Cameron's refusing to budge on 4 demands, and the EU has indicated 3 of the 4 can be met. There's disagreement over the 4th, which would deny EU migrants in-work benefits for 4 years upon arrival. FIFA's Ethics Committee is considering the suspension of European soccer chief Michel Platini in Zurich. Platini won't attend his hearing in protest. He believes the case is a political ploy to prevent him from running for the FIFA's presidency. Platini was provisionally suspended for 3 months, along with FIFA President Sepp Blatter, over receiving a suspicious payment from the soccer organization. FIFA's been in a state of disarray because of an ongoing corruption scandal, though not all are scorning its leaders. Russian President Vladimir Putin thinks Blatter deserves a Nobel Prize.
As for Blatter, he is a very respected person. He has done a lot for the development of world soccer, as well as the world's humanity.
Blatter's been suspended while he's investigated on suspicion of criminal mismanagement and misappropriation of FIFA funds.
Well, on a very different note, Bruce, the Vatican says Mother Teresa will be made a Roman Catholic saint. Well, the Nobel laureate dedicated her life to helping the poorest of the poorest in the streets of Calcutta. Now, my question is, how does someone become a saint?
That's a good question. Well, in the Catholic Church, you have to have performed 2 miracles during your lifetime to achieve that designation. Pope Francis just recognized Mother Teresa's 2nd miracle. Apparently, through the intercession of God, Mother Teresa is said to have healed inexplicably a Brazilian man who was suffering from multiple brain tumors. She's expected to be made a saint, or canonized, as it's called, in September of next year.
And of course, the first miracle was recognized by Pope John Paul II back in 2003, and that for curing a woman with stomach cancer or stomach tumors. Now, charity founded by Mother Teresa, of course, is very happy about this news.
Sure, the charity, the name is Missionaries of Charity. The spokesperson said it's fabulous news. Mother Teresa founded that in 1979, I believe. No, rather, that's when she received her Nobel Prize, but she founded that many years ago, and today I believe there's around 4,500 nuns working for that charity.
4,500. Wow, that's a big number. Well, the charity has said that they will not, however, be celebrating the canonization of Mother Teresa because she wouldn't have wanted that. She would have rather focused her attention to the poorest of the poorest.
No distractions, a very humble person.
Right. Bruce, thank you for that, and thank you for all of this week.
All right, my pleasure.
And beautiful news just a week ahead of Christmas. I'll bet there are many people here in Korea wondering if we'll have a snowy white Christmas. So will we? Let's go over to our Jihan for a weather update. Jihan, how's it looking?
Well, for now, according to the Korea Meteorological Administration, Christmas Day should be a freezing one with a low of -6 and high of 0 here in the capital under partly sunny skies, but at least early next week is shaping up to be a bit bearable temperature-wise with rain in the forecast on Monday morning. And for this weekend, the thermometer is expected to rise with highs hovering above the norms under a good amount of sunshine, but still we're going to wake up to a very cold morning tomorrow with a low of -4 degrees Celsius. And as for the other regions will also get up to a cold morning as Daegu will get up to -1, -4 for Daejeon, and Busan and Jeju will start out their day at 1 and 5. But afternoon highs will be warmer than today as the daily high here in the capital will peak at 6, 8 for Daegu, and Busan and Jeju will see a high of 12 and 10 tomorrow afternoon. And those in the western parts of the peninsula will need to beware of relatively high levels of fine dust due to westerly winds during the day. And a quick reminder, the closed section between the West Pyeongtaek and Songgak interchanges on the Seoye Bridge will reopen at midnight tonight after 17 days of closure. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, can you believe it? We have exactly 2 weeks left of 2015. Hope you have a wonderful weekend wrapping up this year. And that is our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Moon Ganyang. Thanks everyone for watching. And we hope to see you right back here same time Monday on NewsCenter.